What do you recall of the mood in the governor's office and among the other sort of key people on the issue at the time?
At the time that we finally got it passed?
Right.
The sixth, I swear this was the sixth package. Oh, it was a wonderful feeling, for a few days. But then, okay, now how are we going to get this implemented well? How are we going to get it funded? How do we get the formula funded? And as you know, that was the great failure of the later years of that formula, that it just never kept it anywhere near fully funded. If it had been, we wouldn't be in the fix we are today from just school funding equity standpoint, I don't think. But
well, again, with the benefit of so much hindsight over the years, any other mistakes in terms of the policy or the Supreme Court decision that have haunted New Jersey over the many years with the school finance issue?
I think the inability to take on the unions, or unwillingness to take on the unions, and this wasn't just a mistake of our administration or something, it was a mistake of state government leadership from time immemorial that continues to this day. But when I ended up serving on a school board finally in 1990 in Montclair and discovered that we were one of only a handful, maybe 2 states that still had tenure for administrators, I came to believe that was insane, and that it was a terrible mistake for our administration and every other administration not to have gotten rid of tenure for administrators long ago. Because where the rubber meets the road in education is at the level of the principals, and a little less directly the assistant superintendents and the superintendent. The idea that a superintendent cannot easily change principals, fire principals who are clearly not cutting the mustard as leaders and managers of their schools, is just outrageous. And I think it's still part of state law that that they can have tenure. Now, so I have always considered that a major problem in education in New Jersey, and I've always considered, and companion to that is that I wish we had sustained an effort to make good managers and leaders out of that level of the education administrative net, as they finally started to do in New York with the Carolyn Kennedy funded, privately funded initiative that has come into play under the Bloomberg administration. But the thorough and efficient regulatory framework that we started should have evolved into, better and better training interaction with that level of administrators that makes all the difference in terms of the quality of education. And there never seemed to be a sustained effort to do that. And so I think that, for me, is another companion kind of failure. Yeah.
Did the courts focus on spending and dollar equivalency as a measure of equalization, also sort of drive up New Jersey's costs, and in retrospect didn't have the impact on educational improvement that was expected.
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe so. I don't know for sure. Certainly the Abbott decision, I think, can more clearly or more directly be hammered with that critique than the Robinson v. Kale decision. But and then there was a decision, I'm thinking, in the early part of the Whitman administration, one of the Republican administrations, to raise the level of entry teacher salary to a floor substantially above the average entry level teacher floor teacher salary that had been prevailing before. And it was just such a beautiful, easy play for whatever administration was doing that. It didn't even cost the state very much, because by then the localities were back at like 80% of the average years, whatever. And I just considered that insane. And if you want a really direct driver of what was going on there, with driving up, I would put that decision way more as a way more influential driver than the general court mandates. But certainly Abbott, I mean, and I think this decision I'm talking about teacher salaries, entry level salaries, came about at roughly the same time as the Abbott decision, possibly.
Well, there was also legislation, I believe, in the Kane administration that set minimums.
Okay, maybe it was Kane. So, but I consider that to have been just an obvious and direct driver.
What about other approaches during the?
Oh, yeah, well, and the other thing that of course drove costs so heavily was the relaxation of the caps. Caps are just fantastically difficult to maintain and administer fairly. At some point we really lost the gumption to try. And again, my boss at Lehman Brothers was from a very wealthy district, and was making the case that districts really ought to be allowed to spend up to what they think their client populations want them to deliver in terms of educational services, and else you'll have white flight from the districts that or just flight by people of means from all the other districts that where you didn't also have a racial tone. Because I come from Montclair, and white flight was a deep worry, and was helping us drive through our caps while I was on the board, and I supported that. So this is pretty complicated. These influences are pretty complicated to parse out, I think.
During the legislative debate over the tax packages in 1974 and 75, there was also some support for a statewide property tax.
Yes.
And I think even a bill introduced.
Yeah. That's right. There was a bill introduced. I'd forgotten that. Mm-hmm.
Again, in retrospect, would that been a more effective approach?
Well, I think something that bold is still going to be the only really effective long-term approach, because you will always have pressures in later years to not fully fund whatever equalization aid formula you put in place. So you're always going to face these cyclical movements unless you do something radical enough with the tax base, like a statewide property tax or a region, very large defined region-wide property tax system. And I remember us being quite interested more as academics than as practitioners, though, at the time that the bill was being discussed, and I guess it was actually introduced. I'm trying to think who would have introduced it. Do you
I believe
recall?
it's Senator Russo. Maybe.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah, John Russo,
Yeah.
right? That makes sense. And we were very interested in what the Hawaii experience seemed to be telling us about a simply one big unified state school system.
We'll talk more about that. Again, with the benefit of hindsight, would approaching the school problem more on a geographical governance basis, either a statewide system or county-based systems, where the suburbs would be linked with the poorer cities, either statewide or within their counties, have been better to try to get public support for overall reform?
I think it was a non-starter, given the history of New Jersey. You can do things like that in the southern and western states because the Civil War wiped out the legacy of strong home rule in the South, and the West was recently enough developed as states to be able to put in much larger aggregations of local governance, basically strong county or cities that were allowed to keep annexing as they grew. But we considered it a practical impossibility in New Jersey, and I think we were probably right. I mean, we had quite a lot of work being done by the Musto Commission and others on trying to rationalize and rationalize roles among the levels of government and so on. But to really overthrow, in a revolutionary sense, overthrow the system of local control, local governance, is what it would have taken. And the politics, we barely had enough politics to do what we did do in the way of a pretty modest school equalization, property tax equalization, power equalization system, and so on. I mean, it took us six shots to just do that. But to change the governance system of the state in a sweeping a fashion as would make any real difference, I mean, we didn't kid ourselves about whether we had the stroke to do that.